Well, after my recent water post, the pragmatic approach to water manipulation post that I did, I received quite a few emails asking if I could kind of walk through how I go about manipulating or calculating the additions and stuff using both BeerSmith and Bru'n water, the spreadsheet that I linked to in the post. So that's what this video will be about. It's fairly late at night. I'm drinking a couple of beers, so bear with me here. The first way to do this is to just use BeerSmith, and I've done this before. It seems to work well. I think for the most part, people are going to fall with it. If they're using decent water that tastes good, that's not too terribly hard, people are going to fall within at least a somewhat adequate pH range. So this should get you by if you don't feel like messing around with acid additions or using acidulated malt and measuring your pH. So the first thing you're going to want to do, I guess the first necessary thing, is to get your water profile. And I can't recommend more sending in your water to a place like Ward Labs. $20 or so, and you'll get a very precise reading of your water at your house. So what you'll do then, once you get your water profile, you're going to come down to the Ingredients tab and select Water. You'll see it's got it's pre-populated with a whole bunch of different places. And I know a lot of people like to try to match the water profile of these certain cities out there, but you got to remember that most of these places are probably manipulating their water as well. So, if you think you're brewing with by using Dublin water, you're brewing with the water Guinness uses, you're probably, it's probably hard, but it may not be the exact profile. So keep that in mind. You can use East Los Angeles water. So you'll see I've got Fresno water. The way I did that is you select Add Water, name it. I named it Fresno water because I live in Fresno. And you put in all the information that you get from your water profile. It's that easy. Just remember, for sulfate, if it's SO4 minus S on your report, you're going to multiply it by 3. And then if your bicarbonate is reported as CaCO3, you'll want to use certain multipliers as well to get the accurate number for that. And that's in the original post that I'll link to. So plug in all your information there and click OK. And I'm going to click cancel, but you'll have a new water profile in here. Okay, the next step is you're going to design your recipe and get everything going for you. And then you're going to go and select water profile. There's a couple ways of getting here. I've put it in my favorites because I used to use it so often. I'll still occasionally mess around with it. You can also get there by clicking profiles up here. Well, I don't see it. Sorry. Ingredients or tools. There's your water profile tool right there under tools. And so then what I like to do first is you're going to select your base profile. So go in and select the water that you got. That's your base profile. So this is where you're starting out with. You can add it in there every time if you want, but it's a lot easier and it'll stay there through multiple uses. And then you'll see a number that it populates with here. What I do is I go and I'll put my mash volume first, calculate everything, go and add that into the recipe, and then I'll come back and I'll do my sparge volume and then redo the same thing. Since I'm not messing with acids and stuff like that, the one thing to keep in mind is it's not a good idea to add soda, baking soda. I'm sorry, it's not a good idea to add chalk to the sparge water. So let's run through this real quick. I'm doing a no sparge beer, so that's going to make this look a little bit easier. This will be the same thing if you're doing if you collect all of your hot liquor in one vessel, and then you pull off your mash volume, and then use that same original volume of wort for your sparge as well. So that's what this is going to look like. So if you look here, I'll be using 8.56 gallons of water. I'm going to round up to 8.6. So I'll go back over here and type 8.6 in. And then I'm going to go down and select a target water profile that I want to reach, that I'd like to get to. And since this is going to be a pale ale, it's American bitter, what I'm going to do one of the better profiles that I've come across. I call it Tasty's Hoppy Water. That's Tasty McDole on the Brewing Network talks about this water. He just shares it with people, doesn't say there's anything real special about it. So throw that in there and you'll see it then populates all of these. The best thing about BeerSmith, in my opinion, is that you don't have to worry about messing with all of the different additions to see where you get. You can just click this button here, calculate best additions, and it's going to tell you how much of everything to add. So for me, to get close to this, which you'll see my totals are a little bit different, all I have to do is add about 13.7 grams of gypsum, a gram of table salt, 8.9 of Epsom, and 1.7 of calcium chloride. I really like this profile because I don't have to bump up my bicarbonate at all. So you'll see I don't have to add any chalk or baking soda. Next, and this is all going into one volume. It's going into one vessel because I'm doing a no sparge. And so what I'll do is go and add each one of these into my recipe. So 13.7 grams of gypsum, we'll go and add over here. It's going to be under miscellaneous. 13.7. Got to add 1 gram of table salt. Remember, don't use the iodized stuff. I don't even know if I have table salt in here. So I'll have to add table salt into miscellaneous. I usually just leave that out because it doesn't make a huge difference. As you can see, it didn't change much down here. 8.9 grams of Epsom. And let's see, 1.7 of calcium chloride, CaCl. So when you do that, it automatically assumes you're throwing it into the mash, which is what I'll be doing on this one. So this is where one of my small complaints about using BeerSmith for water additions comes in. If you double click these, when you add, let's say you do separate mash and sparge volumes, which is what I do on my 10-gallon batches. What I want to do is be able to delineate between my mash additions and my sparge water additions. But if you look in here, when you double click, there's no way of determining. It says use during, use in, mash, primary, secondary, boil, or bottling. And so what I've done is just to keep them separate so I don't mix the two amounts up is if I'm doing a sparge addition, I'll select boil. And by doing that, it actually throws it down lower. So I know these are all my mash additions up here and these are all my sparge additions. So that's how I do it using BeerSmith. Because I do like to mess around with pH and know that to take pH measurements and make acid additions when I need to, what I've started doing is using the Bru'n water spreadsheet, which is what we're going to get to here in a sec. So after you read your instructions, you're going to click on the second tab, number 1, and that's your water report input. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Just go in here and input all of the data from your water report, just like you did over in BeerSmith. So down here, you're gonna put your pH and all that fun stuff. Down here is a concentration conversion calculator. So read through it. You know, if your bicarbonate, for example, is reported as a ppm as CaCO3, you can put that in here and it'll give you the number that you need to put up here for your bicarbonate for HCO3, stuff like that. Okay, so once you get all your Bru'n water inputted in there, you're going to go onto your sparge acidification tab. First things first, save this because it will save it, and that way you're not going to mess anything up on this page. So once you get to sparge acidification, this is where I go back and forth between BeerSmith quite a bit. So a lot of this stuff is already going to be populated because of what you put in your water report input. So ppm is CaCO3 is 27. My starting pH is 8.1. My desired pH for sparge is 6. And anything with a red triangle in the corner, he has little notes on. Go and read those. They're kind of interesting. Okay, water volume. 8.6, if I remember correctly. From this, let's see. Yeah, we're going to go with 8.6. So that's how many gallons. The type of acid I'm going to use to acidify my sparge water is lactic, and it's 88%. It's the stuff from More Beer. It's been working really well for me. And so since this is separated, this separates sparge and mash acidification. I know that this would be just for sparge. So we're not really using a sparge, so this would actually be 0 gallons. But for the sake of demonstration, let's say I have 8.6. And then all you do is you come down here and it tells you how much liquid acid is required based on the liquid acid that you selected up here. So I would use 1.09 milliliters in my sparge water to get it down to pH of 6. So that's pretty simple. That's probably the easiest thing. Little trick, what I use to measure out my acid additions is a little 10 milliliter syringe type thing used for children's, I believe it's children's ibuprofen. You can get them for free from a Target pharmacy or probably any pharmacy. Just tell them you have a kid and you want one of these little medicine syringes. They hand them out like candy. I have about 30 of those things. So we're not doing a sparge for this beer. I just wanted to use this for demonstration again. So we're not paying any mind to this. But when you do, this is how you do it. It's really easy. If you do smaller batches, I would recommend you use liquid phosphoric acid because it usually comes in at 10% strength. And so you don't have to, you're not measuring less than 1 milliliter, stuff like that. Just keep that in mind. Okay, next up is the water adjustment. This is the part that everybody gets a little confused about. Well, that I've heard people getting very confused about because there's a lot of stuff going on this page. So first thing you're going to see is the desired water profile. This is where you pick what you want the brewing water to end up looking like. So one of my favorite things about Bru'n water is that Martin actually came in and made a whole bunch of neat selections here based on color and balance of the finished beer. So if you're making a Dortmunder export, you want it to be a little bit more on the sharp bitter side, you're going to select yellow bitter. And you'll see stuff change, Since we're making a pale ale that I want to be pale ale-y, I'm actually going to select the pale ale profile. And if you pay attention to the numbers in the blue at the top there, you'll see a lot of them change. Okay, and the next line here, you're going to see the existing water profile. Again, it's pre-populated with what we've already plugged in, so you don't have to worry about changing any of that. Dilution water profile. If you dilute your water, you're going to mess around with this stuff here. So if you're diluting with RO or distilled, that would already be in there. The dilution percentage, if you're doing 50%, 25%, plug that in, and then everything is going to get calculated based on the dilution as well. This is what I mean by in-depth. If you don't dilute your water at all, just leave all this stuff alone. I don't dilute my water. And then this is your finished water profile. So the one downside to Bru'n water, in my opinion, as compared to BeerSmith, is there's no button that just automatically calculates your mineral additions like there is in BeerSmith. So you actually have to go and kind of tweak stuff. The other thing is it calculates by grams per gallon, and over here is where you're going to see actual grams. So it's going to be a little bit different. So we're doing 8.6 mash. You see here that you put your mash and your sparge volumes. It's not recommended to add baking soda, chalk, or pickling lime. Basically, bicarbonate additions or alkalinity additives to your sparge water. I'm going to put 0 there. Okay. So if we come up here and take a look, our target for calcium is 140. We're at 54. So We get calcium from gypsum, calcium chloride, chalk, and pickling lime. But I'm going to try to get most of it from gypsum and calcium chloride. So let's do, this is, I just mess around. I'm not really good at this, but I'm going to add, let's see, 0.5 grams per gallon. And I'll look over at my, since gypsum adds both calcium and sulfate, I'll look at both of those. My sulfate's still really low compared to my goal. So I'm going to bump this up to 0.8, see how that looks. And so you'll see it turn orange. That's just a warning. We want it closer to 300, and we want our calcium closer to 140. So I've got plenty of room to go. So 1 gram per 5 gallons. Let's try 2 grams per 5 gallons. There we are. Now we're getting somewhere. So let's try 1.8. This is probably getting boring at this point, but this is just how it works. 1.7. And so I'm kind of liking this. I'm going to aim a little low. Let's go with 1.5 because I know I'm going to get a little bit from my calcium chloride. Now we're already high enough on the chloride with 0.5, so I'm going to go lower that to 0.3. Let's try 0.4. There we go. And then I'll bump this up to, I think that looks good. You know, target's 140. I'm at 125 with my water, and about 243 ppm. Target's 300. That's pretty good. That's still really high. So magnesium is 18, so that we're going to get our magnesium from Epsom. We'll also get a little bit of sulfate from it, so that's going to bump me even closer to the 300. So let's try 0.2. That gets us to 6. Let's try 0.3. .5, that's good. Let's try 0.6. Oh, I like this. So we're getting closer and closer here. I'm going to bump this up to 1.6. See what I mean? If there was a button that just calculated all of this, it'd make it a whole hell of a lot easier. But there's not. Gives me something to do while drinking a beer, I guess. I'm not going to be using any salt in this either. Canning salt is non-iodized, so just make sure that's what you use. But I'm not going to use any. Baking soda, I'm not going to use any. I don't need harder water necessarily, even though this recommends bicarbonate level of 110. Well, let's use a little bit of baking soda. And if you watch the sodium here and the bicarbonate level, how quickly it goes up with how little baking soda. So let's do 0.2. That pushes our sodium right up to 25, and our bicarbonate's now closer to 65. And I'm just going to stick with that. I don't want a salty beer. That hardness isn't something I'm terribly concerned about. No chalk. I'm not going to use any magnesium chloride or pickling lime either. So this is what I would stick with here for the 8.6 gallons of mash water. It's about 13.8 grams of gypsum, 5.6 grams of Epsom, 1.7 grams of baking soda, and 3.4 of calcium chloride. Now, this is different than what we just saw in BeerSmith, but it's not really different. It's not terribly different. You'll see over here we've got 13.7 gypsum, 8.9 Epsom, and 1.7 calcium chloride. So it's pretty close. We're doing a little bit more calcium chloride here just to get those calcium levels up there. We're still at only 53 ppm, which means we're way, hop balanced on this. So we should get a nice crisp hoppy beer with that. The nice thing about this now, though, is that we get to go check to see what our pH is going to be projected to be. Now, you'll see down here lactic acid is selected, but I don't have any additions yet because I want to go and check to see what my mash acidification is going to be. So we're going to click that one. We've done our water adjustment. We need to plug in our ingredients here. So we'll do pale malt as a base. And we're using, 7 pounds and a pound of C10. Pale malt's 2. C10 is crystal malt. 1 pound. And that's 10. And you got to plug this in manually every time. If you're not into doing that, different option. Victory malt. That's actually a roasted malt, I believe. We're using 0.8, and it's a 25 love malt. And then we're using 4 ounces of C60, I believe. Yeah. And that's a crystal malt, 4 ounces. And we're going to say 60. Okay, with all of that plugged in, we got to make sure we do 8.6 gallons. And this is for a 5.5 gallon batch. You'll see down here what estimated room temperature mash pH is. So it's actually 5.5, which is within range. So let's say that I wanted to bring it down, though, to closer to 5.3, 5.4. What I could do is go back to my mash acidification. One thing you can do is just add acidulated malt. So there's a selection in here for acid malt. You would select that and add acidulated malt until you got to your target mash pH. I'm actually not too concerned with 5.5. I'll stick with that. But let's say I wanted to get down to 5.3. So what we're going to do is go back to water adjustment here and add, let's say, 0.2 milliliters per gallon of that. That's going to give 1.7 milliliter total acid. And then when I come back to my mash acidification, I'm down to 5.4 now. And so that's one way to go about acidifying your mash and bringing that pH down. Now, the only way you're ever going to really know what your mash pH is to take a measurement. And as many people have commented and have told me, buy a quality pH reader because that's pH meter. That's what's going to give you the most accurate reading. Those little cheap ones will tell you if you're within range, and that worked for me for a couple of years until it broke, and I definitely plan to upgrade here soon. So, but I haven't been using a meter for the last few batches, and my results have been fine. So if I'm happy with 5.4, let's say that I am, now I know what I need to add. And so I can just look right here in the yellow and go plug all of this into BeerSmith so that it reminds me. So if let's say I'm going to add 1.7 milliliters of lactic and assume all of this is the same. There's a selection for it in here. 1.7. And that goes in the mash as well. And so the way I like to do that is since all of these dissolve in water, I'll add all of them to the mash water the night before. I might sometimes sprinkle all of the salts, the solids here, into my milled grains the night before. But you know, with the liquid lactic, I'll just mix it right into my mash volume. And that's it. From there, I go and I brew and hope the beer turns out well. There's an adjustment summary tab. This will just give you all of your water additions as well. It'll give you your sparge water additions if you're doing a sparge. This thing down here is pretty neat. So my water is built the way that it's built. It's pretty different than most of the waters out there, it looks like. So that's that. If Dusseldorf is here, you got all of these different cities and stuff, more traditional historic brewing profiles. Yeah, I highly recommend you guys go check out Bru'n Water. If you have any questions, I'm sure Martin is willing to answer them. He knows far more about this than me. At the very least, I can say that it's worked well. I've been very happy with the results that I get. I'm using Bru'n Water every time I make a beer nowadays, plugging it all into BeerSmith. Cheers, everybody. Happy brewing.